My name is Layla Brooke, and at 24 years old, I never imagined that returning from the most successful week of my career would lead to finding my entire life stuffed into cardboard boxes on the front porch. The sight of those weathered moving boxes, stacked like tombstones against the white picket fence of our Denver suburb home, made my stomach drop to the pavement. But before I tell you this complete story of betrayal and unexpected resilience, I'd love to know where you're experiencing this journey from. Drop a comment letting me know your city or country. And if stories of overcoming family challenges and finding inner strength resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of transformation that I share every week. Standing there with my laptop bag still slung over my shoulder and my small rolling suitcase beside me, I watched as my mother, Patricia, emerged from behind the house with my 3 older siblings flanking her like a tribunal. There was Marcus, 28, in his pressed button-down shirt even on a Saturday. Then Sarah, 26, with her arms crossed and that familiar look of impatience she'd perfected in law school. Finally, there was David, 25. Avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with his car keys. The smile that had been plastered on my face since landing at Denver International Airport, the same smile I'd worn while presenting to Fortune 500 executives in San Francisco, evaporated completely as Mom's words cut through the crisp October air. "You're almost 25, Layla. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet." Growing up as the youngest of 4 in our middle-class Denver neighborhood had never been easy, but it became infinitely harder after Dad passed away when I was just 8 years old. Thomas Brooke had been the heart of our family, the one who made Mom laugh and treated each of us kids as individuals rather than reflections of his expectations. When cancer took him, it took more than just our father. It transformed our mother into someone I barely recognized. Patricia had been warm once, the kind of mom who made elaborate birthday cakes and attended every school play. After Dad's death, she hardened into someone who measured love through achievements and compliance. She took on 2 jobs, her morning shift at the medical office and evening bookkeeping for local businesses, constantly reminding us of her sacrifices. "I gave up everything to keep this family together," became her daily mantra, usually followed by detailed expectations of how we should show our gratitude. As the baby of the family, I experienced both the benefits and burdens of my position. By the time I needed braces or college tuition, Mom was more financially stable than she'd been with my older siblings. But emotionally, years of single parenthood had worn her down to a sharp edge. She controlled every aspect of my life with military precision. My friends, my major, even my weekend plans required her approval. My siblings had all chosen paths that pleased her. Marcus became an accountant, following Dad's practical footsteps. Sarah earned her law degree and worked at a prestigious firm downtown. David had become a successful software engineer at a tech startup. They'd all married people Mom approved of, bought homes in neighborhoods she deemed suitable, and started having children according to her preferred timeline. In her eyes, they were success stories, proof that her strict parenting had paid off. Then there was me. I'd studied communications instead of something practical like business or engineering. I'd taken a job at a growing marketing agency rather than a traditional corporate position. And at 24, I remained stubbornly single, much to Mom's constant disappointment. While I wasn't rebellious by normal standards, in our family's rigid structure, I was practically a revolutionary. "When are you going to get a real career?" Mom would ask during our mandatory Sunday dinners. "Sarah was already making partner-level money at your age." Despite these constant comparisons, I had chosen to live at home after graduating from the University of Colorado. The decision made financial sense initially. My entry-level position at Creative Solutions Marketing didn't pay enough to cover Denver's skyrocketing rent prices while also managing my student loans. Living with Mom allowed me to save money and pay down debt faster. "You can stay as long as you need to get established," Mom had said when I first moved back home. Family takes care of family, but her support came with invisible strings attached. I paid rent. Not much, but enough to help with household expenses. I handled most of the cooking and cleaning, drove Mom to appointments, helped her with technology problems, and served as her personal therapist for complaints about neighbors, coworkers, and occasionally my siblings, though never when they were present. The dynamic with Marcus, Sarah, and David was equally complicated. To them, I was still the little sister whose opinions carried less weight than their, quote, real-world experience. When family disagreements arose, they formed an impenetrable alliance with Mom, dismissing my perspective as naive or uninformed. "You'll understand these things when you've been in the workforce longer," Marcus would say condescendingly, despite the fact that I'd been working part-time throughout college and had even studied abroad in Spain, experiences none of them had pursued. The tension between my desire for independence and the weight of family expectations had been building for months. Friends my age were living in shared apartments, dating freely, and staying out past midnight without explaining themselves to anyone. I envied their freedom, but felt trapped between financial reality and family obligation. Then came the opportunity that I thought would finally prove my worth to them all. Creative Solutions had landed their biggest client yet, a national retail chain looking to revamp their entire digital presence. As the team member with the freshest ideas and strongest social media expertise, I was chosen to lead the presentation in San Francisco. It was my first major client presentation, my first solo business trip, and potentially the career breakthrough I'd been working toward. Standing there on that porch, surrounded by boxes containing everything I owned, I realized how naive I'd been to think success would change anything. The professional triumph I'd experienced just days earlier felt like it had happened to someone else entirely. The silence stretched between us like a chasm as I stared at the boxes, then back at my family's unified front. None of them moved to help with my luggage. None of them offered an explanation that made sense. The crisp October air suddenly felt freezing against my skin. "What do you mean, stand on my own feet?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been paying rent, doing chores, working full-time. What exactly haven't I been doing?" Patricia stepped forward, her jaw set in that familiar line of determination I'd seen whenever she made unilateral decisions about our lives. "Your siblings were all completely independent by 23. You've had plenty of time to figure this out." "Figure what out?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "You never said anything about a deadline. We never discussed me moving out." Marcus nodded, as if my mother had made perfect sense. "It's past time you learned real responsibility, Layla. We've all had to make it on our own." The hypocrisy of his statement would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Marcus had lived at home until he was 24, and Mom had co-signed his first apartment lease. Sarah had received a down payment gift for her condo, and David's student loans had been mysteriously paid off by an early inheritance from a great-aunt none of us had ever met. "This is insane," I said, looking from face to face, searching for any crack in their collective resolve. "I just got back from the biggest presentation of my career. I secured a 6-figure client, and I'm probably getting promoted. Can't we at least talk about this like adults?" "We tried talking," Sarah interjected, checking her designer watch as if my crisis was making her late for something more important. "You've ignored every hint Mom's dropped about your need to move forward with your life. Hints aren't the same as actual communication." I shot back. "Normal families discuss major life decisions. They don't pack someone's belongings while they're out of town and stage an intervention on their front lawn." "Don't raise your voice to your mother," Marcus warned, taking a step closer with his chest puffed out like some kind of family enforcer. The absurdity hit me all at once. Here I was, being lectured about respect, while being treated with absolute disrespect. My own family had waited until I was 200 miles away to pack up my life and decide my future without me. "What is this really about?" I asked, a suspicion forming as I remembered overhearing hushed phone conversations between Mom and Sarah about property values in our neighborhood. "Are you selling the house?" A flicker of surprise crossed Patricia's face before her expression hardened again. "My financial decisions are none of your concern anymore." "They are when they involve making me homeless without warning," I countered. "And they definitely are when this house was left to all 4 of us in Dad's will." The uncomfortable glances exchanged between my siblings confirmed my suspicions. They'd hoped I either wouldn't remember the legal details from when I was 8, or that I'd be too emotional to think clearly about my rights. You wouldn't actually sue your own family. David spoke for the first time, his voice uncertain. You wouldn't actually steal from your own sister, I replied, my anger finally cutting through the shock. A neighbor walking her golden retriever slowed her pace as she passed, clearly eavesdropping on our family drama. My humiliation deepened as I realized our dysfunction was becoming neighborhood entertainment. Look, I said, lowering my voice, let's go inside and discuss this rationally. There has to be a solution that works for everyone. There's nothing to discuss, Mom replied firmly. The decision has been made. Made by everyone except the person it affects most, I said. When did you all become a committee that votes on my life? Kevin shifted uncomfortably, and for a moment, I thought he might actually speak up for me. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, We all talked it over and agreed this was necessary. You need to launch your adult life properly. That statement hit me like a physical blow. They'd held family meetings about me, analyzed my life like a case study, and determined my fate while I was in San Francisco celebrating what I thought was the beginning of real success. When exactly did you pack all this? I gestured toward the boxes, dreading the answer. Yesterday, Patricia answered matter-of-factly. Marcus and David helped me. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd deliberately waited until I was at my most vulnerable. Traveling alone, focused on my presentation, trusting them to be the family safety net I'd always believed in. So what am I supposed to do right now? Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? You have friends, don't you? Sarah suggested with a tone that implied doubt. Or, get a hotel room. You just came back from California. Surely you can afford it. They had no idea that my company had paid for the San Francisco trip, or that my savings account contained exactly $847 after paying this month's rent, student loans, and car insurance. The modest amount I'd managed to save was earmarked for eventually moving out, when I chose to, after proper planning and discussion. Can I at least come inside and sort through these boxes? I doubt you knew what was important when you were packing. Everything's there, Mom said with finality. Your room has been completely cleared. The casual way she said it made my stomach clench. They hadn't just packed my belongings. They'd erased me from the house entirely, as if I'd never belonged there at all. Years of suppressed frustration erupted, as I finally said what I'd been holding back for too long. How dare you, I said, my voice trembling with rage. How dare all of you stand there acting righteous while treating me with such cruelty? Drama queen, as always, Sarah muttered under her breath. Drama? I laughed without any humor. You ambush me after a business trip, throw my life into boxes, tell me I'm homeless effective immediately, and I'm being dramatic? We knew you'd react like this, Marcus said. That's exactly why we handled it while you were gone. You mean why you waited until I couldn't defend myself? That's not mature adult behavior. That's cowardly. Mom's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare speak to us that way after everything I've sacrificed for you. What exactly have you sacrificed for me lately? I demanded. You've charged me rent, made me your live-in housekeeper, criticized every choice I've made, and compared me to my siblings at every opportunity. Where's the sacrifice in that? You ungrateful, she began. Ungrateful? I cut her off. I've been nothing but grateful. I've thanked you, helped you, supported you emotionally and financially. I've swallowed every criticism and endured every comparison, and I've still shown up with love and respect. The mask of family unity was finally cracking as they began to argue among themselves about how much they'd revealed. Mom's already accepted an offer on the house, David admitted, earning sharp looks from his siblings. The buyers want immediate possession. The truth emerged in painful pieces. Mom had received an offer significantly above market value. Rather than discussing it with me, she decided with my siblings that I should receive a reduced share of any proceeds to compensate for my years of living at home, years during which I'd paid rent and handled household responsibilities. So this is about money, I said as understanding dawned. You're pushing me out to sell the house, and you don't want me to interfere with your windfall. Standing there surrounded by boxes containing my entire life, looking at the faces of people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done fighting for a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. The moment of clarity hit me like a lightning bolt. Standing there on the sidewalk of my childhood neighborhood, surrounded by boxes and the people who were supposed to love me most, I felt something shift deep inside my chest. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was liberation. I walked to my Honda Civic, parked at the curb where I'd left it before my San Francisco trip, and popped the trunk. The small hatchback suddenly looked like my salvation, rather than just transportation. "What are you doing?" Mom demanded, her voice carrying that familiar tone of authority she expected me to obey. "Exactly what you want," I replied, my voice eerily calm. "I'm leaving." For the first time since I'd arrived, my family looked uncertain. They'd expected tears, begging, or at least a prolonged argument. They hadn't anticipated immediate compliance. One by one, I began loading the boxes into my car. Thankfully, I'd always been a minimalist, and my Honda's fold-down rear seats provided more space than I'd realized. My entire life, clothes, books, laptop, the framed photo of Dad and me at a Rockies game, my college diploma, childhood mementos, fit into 17 boxes and 3 garbage bags. "Layla, maybe we can," David started, but I cut him off with a look. "No," I said firmly. "You all made your decision without me. I'm making mine without you." As I loaded the last box, containing my small television and the houseplant I'd managed to keep alive for 3 years, I turned to face them one final time. They stood together in a tight cluster, united in their certainty about what was best for everyone except me. "You know what's funny?" I said, closing my trunk with more force than necessary. "I just landed the biggest client our agency has ever signed. I'm about to get promoted to senior account manager. I brought gifts for all of you from San Francisco to celebrate." I gestured to the small shopping bag still sitting in my front seat, filled with carefully chosen presents they'd never receive. "I actually thought you'd be proud of me for once," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I thought maybe this would finally be enough to earn your respect." "Layla, honey," Mom began, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished," I said. "For 24 years I've tried to be the daughter you wanted. I've measured myself against Marcus, Sarah, and David, always coming up short in your eyes. I've apologized for choosing a different path, for not fitting your definition of success, for simply being myself." The neighbors had given up any pretense of not watching. Mrs. Henderson from across the street was openly staring from her front porch, and the family with the golden retriever had stopped their walk entirely. But standing here right now, looking at boxes packed by people who claim to love me, I finally understand something, I continued. "The problem was never me. The problem is that you stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a project to fix or a burden to manage." Marcus stepped forward, his face red with indignation. "That's not." "It is," I interrupted. "And you know what? I'm grateful. You've just given me the greatest gift possible. The permission to stop trying to earn something you were never planning to give anyway." I got into my car and rolled down the window. "When you sell the house and split Dad's legacy 3 ways instead of 4, remember this moment. Remember that you chose money over your daughter and sister. I hope it's worth it." Sarah finally showed some emotion, her carefully composed mask slipping. "You can't just leave like this. We're family." "Family doesn't treat each other this way," I replied, starting my engine. "But don't worry, you'll get to keep telling yourselves that you did this for my own good. I'm sure that'll help you sleep at night." As I drove away from the house where I'd lived for 24 years, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to live up to someone else's expectations. I wasn't measuring my worth against impossible standards or walking on eggshells to maintain peace. I was just me, driving through Denver with everything I owned in my backseat, completely free to decide what came next. My phone started buzzing immediately, texts from my family members, probably realizing the implications of their actions now that I'd actually left. I ignored them all and called the one person I knew I could trust completely, my college roommate Maya Chen. "Layla, how did the presentation go? Are you celebrating?" Maya's cheerful voice filled my car through the Bluetooth connection. "Maya," I said, and my voice cracked despite my efforts to stay strong. "I need help." "What happened?" "Are you okay?" Through choked sobs, I managed to explain the situation. The successful presentation, the homecoming ambush, the boxes, the confrontation. Everything. "Those absolute—" Maya caught herself. Then her voice turned fierce and protective. "Come here right now. You can stay as long as you need to, no questions asked." "Are you sure? I know your apartment is small, and you and Jake. Are you seriously asking if I'm sure about helping my best friend who just got blindsided by her own family? Get over here before I drive to your mom's house and give them a piece of my mind they'll never forget." Maya lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill with her boyfriend Jake, about 30 minutes from my family's house in the suburbs. When I arrived, both of them came out to help me unload my car without a single question about why all my belongings were in cardboard boxes and trash bags. "We'll figure out the logistics tomorrow," Maya said, leading me up to their second-floor apartment. "Tonight, you just need to breathe." Their place was tiny but warm, filled with plants, books, and the kind of comfortable clutter that comes from two people actually living their lives, instead of performing them. They'd already cleared out their small den, setting up an air mattress and making space in the closet for my things. That first night was simultaneously the worst and most liberating of my life. Lying on an unfamiliar air mattress, surrounded by boxes I couldn't bear to unpack, I cycled through every emotion possible: rage, grief, fear, and strangely, excitement. My phone continued buzzing with messages throughout the evening. Maya finally convinced me to look at them, if only to see how my family was handling the aftermath of their decision. Mom's messages were predictable, a mixture of guilt-tripping and justification. "You're overreacting," one read. "We only want what's best for you," said another. "Come home and we'll discuss this rationally," concluded a third, as if rationality had been an option when they were packing my life into boxes. Marcus sent a series of texts that read like a lecture on financial responsibility, completely missing the irony that he'd lived at home longer than I had and received significantly more financial support. Sarah's messages were practical to the point of coldness: links to apartment listings, suggestions for roommate-finding apps, and reminders about the importance of building credit history. Not a single word of apology or acknowledgement that their methods had been cruel. David's texts were different. Buried among the family party line were hints of regret. "Maybe we could have handled this better," and "I hope you understand we thought this was necessary." "These people are toxic," Maya declared after reading the messages over my shoulder. "I mean, I knew your family was controlling, but this is next-level dysfunction." "They're still my family," I said weakly, the words feeling hollow even as I spoke them. "Family doesn't ambush you when you're vulnerable," Jake interjected from the kitchen where he was making tea. "Family doesn't pack your stuff while you're away. Family doesn't treat you like a problem to be solved." His words echoed what I'd been thinking but hadn't been able to articulate. What had happened wasn't normal family conflict. It was emotional abuse disguised as tough love. That night, as I stared at the ceiling in Maya's den, I made 3 decisions that would define the next chapter of my life. First, I would build a life entirely independent from my family's approval or support. No more asking for their opinion. No more measuring my success against their expectations. No more hoping for validation that would never come. Second, I would never again allow anyone to have that much power over my sense of self-worth. The woman who had driven away from that house was different from the one who had arrived, stronger, clearer about her boundaries, and finally ready to live for herself. Third, I would turn this betrayal into something meaningful. If my family wanted to discard me, I'd show them exactly what they'd thrown away. As I finally drifted off to sleep around 3 a.m., I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about the future. For the first time in my adult life, tomorrow belonged entirely to me. The first week at Maya and Jake's apartment passed in a blur of practical challenges and emotional processing. Maya had insisted I take as much time as I needed, but I knew their one-bedroom space wasn't designed for 3 adults long-term. Their generosity bought me precious time to find housing without making desperate decisions, but I was acutely aware that every day I stayed was an imposition on their relationship and privacy. During my lunch breaks at Creative Solutions, I threw myself into apartment hunting with the same intensity I'd brought to the San Francisco presentation. Denver's rental market had become even more competitive than I'd feared. Most landlords required proof of income at 3 times the monthly rent, pristine credit, first and last month's rent plus security deposit, and references from previous landlords, a requirement I obviously couldn't meet. My savings account, which had seemed reasonably healthy when I was living at home, looked pathetic when measured against Denver's housing costs. After paying my share of household expenses at Mom's, my student loans, car payment, and other bills, I'd managed to save $847 over 3 years. It wasn't nearly enough for the typical move-in costs, which averaged between $2,500 and $3,000 for even modest apartments. After 8 days of searching, I finally found a studio apartment in a neighborhood that was politely described as up-and-coming, code for not the safest area, but the rent won't bankrupt you. The landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Petrov who owned several small properties, was willing to accept a larger security deposit in lieu of rental history. "You seem like a good girl," he said in his thick Russian accent after our brief meeting. "I trust my instincts about people." The apartment was tiny, 450 square feet that included the kitchenette and bathroom. The hardwood floors were scuffed. The paint was several years overdue for refreshing, and the radiator made concerning noises at random hours. But the rent was $750 a month, utilities included, and it was mine. No one could pack my belongings while I was away or question my life choices. Moving day highlighted just how little I actually owned. My family had packed my personal belongings, but I had none of the household essentials necessary for independent living. No dishes, cookware, towels, cleaning supplies, or furniture beyond my bedroom set, which barely fit in the studio space. "We're throwing you a housewarming party," Maya announced as we finished arranging my bed and dresser in the main room. "But it's going to be a practical one. Everyone brings something useful instead of decorative stuff you can't afford." True to her word, she organized a small gathering that weekend. College friends, co-workers, and even some of Maya's neighbors showed up, bearing mismatched dishes, secondhand furniture, cleaning supplies, and basic household items. By the end of the evening, my empty apartment had been transformed into a functional, if eclectic, living space. "It's not much," I apologized as we sat on a collection of folding chairs and cushions, eating pizza off paper plates. "It's yours," my friend Alex corrected. "You did this completely on your own, which is more than most of us can say." The financial reality of solo living hit me immediately. After paying rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, and my existing debts, my previously adequate salary left almost nothing for savings or emergencies. I created detailed spreadsheets, tracking every expense, learned to meal prep on Sundays, and discovered which grocery stores offered the best prices on essentials. But work became my anchor and salvation. The Monday after moving into my studio, I arrived at the office early and channeled all my emotional turmoil into professional excellence. I threw myself into following up on the San Francisco presentation, coordinating with the new client's team, and developing implementation strategies for their campaign. My boss, Jennifer Walsh, noticed the change in my work intensity. "You've been putting in serious hours lately," she commented during our weekly one-on-one meeting. "The Mountain View retail presentation was outstanding, and your follow-up has been flawless." "Thank you," I replied, not mentioning the personal chaos that had been fueling my professional dedication. "We're restructuring the account management team," she continued, leaning back in her chair. "I'd like to promote you to senior account manager. It comes with a 20% salary increase, better benefits, and you'd be leading the digital strategy division." The promotion couldn't have come at a better time. The additional income wouldn't make me wealthy, but it would ease the constant anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck. More importantly, it validated my career choices, the very path my family had dismissed as inadequate. "I accept," I said, trying to keep my voice professional while internally celebrating. "Great, the promotion is effective next Monday. You'll be taking over 3 major accounts, including Mountain View Retail. Congratulations, Layla." Walking back to my desk, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. This success belonged entirely to me, earned through my own skills and effort, without family connections or support. While my professional life flourished, I struggled emotionally during those first weeks. Nightmares about homelessness disrupted my sleep. Every unexpected noise in my new building triggered anxiety responses. The radiators clanking at 3 a.m. would wake me in a panic, convinced someone was trying to break in. Trust became a complicated issue. I found myself scrutinizing coworkers, comments for hidden criticism, questioning friends, motivations, and assuming that everyone was evaluating my worthiness. The betrayal had shaken my fundamental beliefs about relationships and reliability. "You should talk to someone professional," Maya suggested during one of our weekly coffee dates. "This level of stress isn't sustainable." "Therapy is expensive," I countered, though I knew she was right. "Your new job has health insurance, doesn't it? And didn't you say there's an employee assistance program?" She helped me navigate the insurance website to find therapists covered by my plan. The process was overwhelming. Pages of providers, specialties I didn't understand, and the anxiety of admitting I needed help. Eventually, I found Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in family trauma and adult children of dysfunctional families. Our first session was harder than I'd expected. Sitting in her comfortable office, surrounded by plants and soft lighting, I found myself crying before I'd even finished explaining why I was there. "What your family did wasn't normal or acceptable," Dr. Martinez said after I'd shared the story of my forced eviction. "Removing someone from their home without notice or discussion is legally questionable even between family members. Doing it while you were traveling shows premeditation and a fundamental lack of respect for your autonomy." Hearing a professional validate my experience was both relieving and overwhelming. For weeks, I'd been questioning whether I was overreacting, whether maybe my family had been right about my need for independence, whether I should have been more grateful for their tough love. "You're experiencing complex grief," she explained. "You're mourning not just the loss of your living situation, but the loss of your perception of your family, your sense of safety, and your beliefs about unconditional love." The therapy sessions became a lifeline, helping me understand that my emotional reactions were normal responses to abnormal treatment. We worked on rebuilding my sense of self-worth separate from family approval, developing coping strategies for anxiety, and learning to trust my own perceptions instead of second-guessing every feeling. Practical independence became another focus of my new life. Living alone meant learning skills I'd never needed while at home. I taught myself basic plumbing after my kitchen sink started dripping, figured out how to unclog a drain using YouTube videos, learned to cook more than just pasta and sandwiches, and mastered the art of negotiating with utility companies. Each small victory felt monumental. Successfully fixing my leaky faucet, cooking a decent stir-fry, or managing my monthly budget without going into debt proved that I could not only survive on my own, but actually thrive. 2 months after moving out, I encountered David at a downtown coffee shop. The meeting was accidental and awkward, both of us freezing when we spotted each other in the crowded cafe. "You look different," he said after we'd reluctantly approached each other. "I look independent," I replied, surprised by my own confidence. "How are you doing, really?" "I'm doing well," I answered truthfully. "I got promoted at work. I have my own place. I'm learning that I'm stronger than anyone gave me credit for." He shifted uncomfortably, looking younger than his 25 years. "Mom asks about you sometimes." Strange way of showing interest, cutting off all contact after throwing me out. "You stopped answering our messages," he pointed out. "Yes, I did. Would you keep talking to people who treated you like a burden to be discarded?" We stood in uncomfortable silence, holding our coffee cups like shields between us. "She wants you to come to Sunday dinner," he finally said. "To work things out." "On what terms?" I asked. "Is she planning to acknowledge what she did was wrong? Will there be an apology, or does she expect me to pretend nothing happened and return to the same unhealthy dynamic?" His expression told me everything I needed to know. There would be no acknowledgement, no apology, no real change, just an expectation that I'd be grateful to be invited back into a family that had demonstrated how little they valued me. "I can't do that, David," I said gently. "I'm not the same person who left Mom's house 2 months ago. I won't go back to walking on eggshells or measuring my worth by your approval." As we parted ways, I felt stronger rather than shaken. The encounter had tested my resolve and confirmed that I was on the right path. I was building a life based on my own choices and values, and it felt more authentic than anything I'd ever experienced. 3 months into my life of complete independence, something remarkable began happening. The constant anxiety that had characterized my first weeks alone gradually subsided, replaced by a growing confidence in my ability to handle whatever challenges emerged. My studio apartment, once a symbol of my family's rejection, had become a sanctuary where I could finally breathe freely. My promotion to senior account manager had opened doors I hadn't even known existed. Leading the digital strategy division meant higher visibility within creative solutions and direct interaction with major clients. I assembled a small but effective team, implemented new analytics strategies, and consistently delivered results that impressed both clients and executives. Your campaign for Mountain View Retail increased their online engagement by 45%, Jennifer announced during our quarterly all-hands meeting. That's exceptional work, Layla, and it's exactly the kind of innovative thinking that sets us apart. The acknowledgement, delivered in front of the entire company, felt more validating than any family approval I'd ever received. My colleagues saw my value without the distorting lens of family history or endless comparisons to my siblings. With financial stability came practical improvements that felt like small miracles. I traded my unreliable 2015 Honda for a certified, pre-owned 2019 model with a warranty. When my lease came up for renewal, I found a larger one-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. Still modest, but with actual natural light, and a small balcony where I could grow herbs and flowers. The process of furnishing my new space became an exercise in self-discovery. Free from my mother's beige and brown aesthetic preferences and my siblings' opinions about practical choices, I could finally explore my own taste. I discovered I loved bold colors, vintage finds from estate sales, and furniture that actually reflected my personality rather than what was expected. "This place feels like you," Maya commented when she helped me arrange my new living room around a jewel-toned sofa I'd found at a consignment shop. "Your old room never did." She was right. My childhood bedroom had remained frozen in teenage pastels, while my space at Mom's house had felt temporary, despite 3 years of occupancy. This apartment, though rented, was the first place that truly expressed who I was becoming. My social world expanded beyond my small circle of college friends. I joined a book club at the local library, started volunteering at a women's shelter on weekends, and accepted invitations to work events I previously would have avoided out of social anxiety. Through these activities, I met people who knew me only as I was now, not as the family disappointment or the overlooked youngest sibling. Among these new connections was Ethan Rodriguez, a freelance graphic designer who collaborated with our agency on client projects. Our professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship through shared coffee breaks and discussions about creative strategy. He was different from anyone I'd dated before, genuine, supportive, and refreshingly uninterested in playing games or maintaining facades. "Tell me about your family," Ethan asked during what had definitely become a date at a small Italian restaurant in my new neighborhood. The question I'd been dreading felt less loaded than it once had. "That's complicated," I replied, then shared the condensed version of recent events. His response was straightforwardly supportive. "They sound incredibly toxic. I'm sorry you went through that, but honestly, you seem better off without that kind of manipulation in your life." No defense of family loyalty. No suggestion that I must have contributed to the problem. No pressure to reconcile for the sake of maintaining relationships. Just simple validation and respect for my experience. Ethan's healthy family dynamics eventually provided a window into what functional relationships could look like. Sunday dinners at his parents' house in Lakewood showed me respectful disagreement, unconditional support, and genuine interest in each other's lives, without judgment or comparison. His mother asked about my work because she was actually interested, not because she was evaluating whether my career met some arbitrary standard. The contrast with my own family was both painful and enlightening. Watching Ethan's sister discuss her career change from teaching to social work, a decision met with concern but ultimate support, I realized how abnormal my family's reaction to my choices had been. My therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez evolved from crisis management to deeper healing and personal growth. With professional guidance, I examined childhood patterns, recognized unhealthy coping mechanisms, and developed strategies for setting boundaries in all relationships. "You've made remarkable progress," she observed during a particularly insightful session. "You're actively breaking generational patterns of dysfunction." The comment struck me deeply. Perhaps my family's rejection had actually given me something valuable, the opportunity to create healthier relationship dynamics than the ones I'd grown up with. This psychological shift manifested in unexpected ways. I became more assertive at work, proposing bold campaign ideas and confidently defending my strategies. I developed clearer boundaries with friends, no longer automatically agreeing to plans that drained my energy or compromised my values. I pursued interests I'd previously abandoned because they didn't meet family approval: photography, creative writing, and weekend hiking trips that fed my soul rather than someone else's expectations. After 4 months of sporadic, increasingly hostile messages from my mother and older siblings, I made the difficult decision to block their numbers entirely. Each interaction had reset my emotional healing, leaving me anxious and second-guessing my progress for days afterward. David remained the exception, as his messages had evolved from family pressure tactics to genuine, if awkward, attempts at independent connection. He occasionally texted about work or shared memes that reminded him of inside jokes from our childhood. I appreciated his efforts, though I remained cautious about rebuilding trust too quickly. 5 months after leaving home, I attended a marketing conference where I unexpectedly reconnected with Professor Williams, my favorite instructor from college. She had always encouraged my creative thinking and unconventional approaches, when other professors focused solely on traditional metrics and established formulas. "Layla Brooke, how wonderful to see you." She greeted me warmly during a networking break. "I heard through the alumni network that you're making waves at Creative Solutions." Our conversation over conference coffee revealed that she'd always seen potential in me that my family had overlooked or dismissed. Her belief in my abilities had been genuine rather than conditional, a rare experience during my formative years. "You always had a unique perspective," she told me. "I'm not surprised you found success by trusting your instincts instead of following conventional wisdom." That chance encounter inspired me to reach out to others who might be struggling with similar family challenges. I started a blog called Flying Solo, where I shared practical advice for young adults establishing independence without family support. The posts covered everything from apartment hunting and budgeting to emotional resilience and building chosen family relationships. The blog connected me to an online community of people with similar experiences. Comments and messages poured in from readers who found validation in my story and hope in my progress. What began as personal catharsis evolved into a meaningful platform for mutual support and practical guidance. "Your post about setting boundaries during holidays literally saved my sanity," one reader wrote. "For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about protecting my peace during family visits. Through helping others, I continued my own healing." Writing about my experiences transformed painful memories into useful lessons and surrounded me with a community of people who understood without requiring explanation. The blog also caught the attention of a local lifestyle magazine, which asked me to write a monthly column about young adult independence. The additional income was modest but meaningful, and the platform allowed me to reach even more people navigating similar challenges. As I approached the 6-month mark since leaving home, I realized something profound had shifted. The family that had discarded me had unintentionally given me the greatest gift possible: the opportunity to discover my own strength, build authentic relationships, and create a life aligned with my true values rather than inherited expectations. One evening, sitting on my small balcony with a cup of tea and my laptop, working on a blog post about finding your chosen family, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from David, not a text. "Layla," it began, "I hope you're willing to read this. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I need you to know that I think we were wrong. All of us. Mom is talking about reaching out to you because she's having some problems, but I wanted to contact you first, as your brother, not as her messenger. I miss you. Not the version of you that we tried to make fit our expectations, but the real you. The sister who always saw things differently and wasn't afraid to speak up, even when we made her feel small for it. I don't know if you're willing to talk to me, but I'd like to try to rebuild our relationship on better terms, if you're open to it. I read the message 3 times, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Anger at how long it had taken, sadness for the months of silence, but also a small spark of hope. David was finally seeing me as a person rather than a problem, acknowledging the dysfunction rather than defending it. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I called Maya, then Dr. Martinez, processing the unexpected outreach with the support system I'd built from scratch. The decision of whether and how to respond would be mine alone, made from a position of strength rather than desperate need for acceptance. That night, I fell asleep in my own bed, in my own apartment, surrounded by my own choices, finally understanding that sometimes the most important family is the one you create for yourself. I spent 3 days thinking about David's email before responding. During my therapy session that week, Drive, Martinez helped me process the complex emotions his message had triggered: hope, skepticism, anger, and an unexpected longing for the brother I remembered from childhood before family dynamics had hardened into toxic patterns. "What do you want from this potential reconnection?" she asked. "I want my brother back," I admitted. "But not at the expense of the boundaries I've worked so hard to establish." That's a healthy perspective. You can explore rebuilding a relationship while protecting the progress you've made. I finally replied to David's email with cautious openness. "I appreciate you reaching out and acknowledging what happened. I'm willing to talk, but I need you to understand that I'm not the same person who left Mom's house 6 months ago. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be on different terms than before." He responded within hours, suggesting we meet for coffee at a neutral location. No family drama, no pressure, just 2 adults trying to figure out if they could have a healthy sibling relationship. We met at a small cafe in Cherry Creek, halfway between our respective neighborhoods. David looked older somehow, more tired than I remembered. The confident, dismissive attitude he'd always carried seemed diminished. "You do look different," he said after we'd ordered our drinks. "More settled, I guess. Like you're comfortable in your own skin." "I am," I replied simply. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living according to my own values instead of trying to meet someone else's expectations. We talked for 2 hours, the longest real conversation we'd had since we were teenagers. David apologized genuinely for his role in my eviction, admitting that he'd known it was wrong but had been too cowardly to stand up to Mom and our older siblings. "I've always gone along with whatever Marcus and Sarah decided," he confessed. "It was easier than thinking for myself or dealing with conflict." "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. "Watching how you handled being thrown out, honestly. You didn't fall apart like we all predicted. You didn't come crawling back begging for forgiveness. You just built a whole life without us. It made me realize that maybe you were never the problem." The conversation revealed that my departure had created cracks in the family's united front. Without me as a convenient scapegoat for dysfunction, tensions between my siblings had begun emerging. Marcus had become increasingly controlling, trying to manage everyone's decisions. Sarah had grown more critical and judgmental. Mom had become more demanding of emotional support from her remaining children. "It's like your leaving made everyone see how toxic our family dynamics actually are," David said. "We just didn't want to admit it while you were there." He mentioned that Mom had been asking about me more frequently, particularly in recent weeks. "She won't admit she made a mistake, but I think she's starting to realize what she lost." "What kind of problems is she having?" I asked, remembering his email's reference to Mom needing to reach out. David hesitated. "Financial ones, mostly. And some health scares that turned out to be nothing serious, but they scared her. She's been talking about feeling alone, which is ironic, since she's the one who decided we were better off without you." I felt a familiar tug of concern, the ingrained response of a daughter who'd spent years managing her mother's emotions. But this time, The feeling was tempered by clear-eyed recognition of the patterns Dr. Martinez had helped me identify. "I'm sorry she's struggling," I said carefully, "but I'm not responsible for fixing problems she created." "I know," David said quickly. "I'm not asking you to. I just thought you should know that she might try to contact you directly." We agreed to start slowly, occasional coffee dates, text check-ins, and see if we could build something healthier than what we'd had before. I was cautiously optimistic but realistic about the challenges of changing decades-old relationship patterns. 2 weeks after my coffee with David, my prediction came true. I was working late at the office when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Something made me answer instead of letting it go to voicemail. "Layla? It's Mom." Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, less commanding. "I got your new number from David. I hope it's okay that I called." "What do you need, Mom?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I wanted to talk to you. To explain, to ask." She paused, and I could hear her struggling with words that didn't come naturally to her. "I've been having some difficulties, and I realized that I might have been hasty in how we handled your living situation." Hasty. Not wrong, not cruel, not emotionally abusive. Hasty. "What kind of difficulties?" I asked, though part of me already knew. The story emerged slowly. Mom had indeed sold the house, receiving a substantial windfall that should have secured her retirement. But instead of investing wisely or purchasing something smaller and manageable, she'd made a series of poor financial decisions based on advice from a church acquaintance who turned out to be running an investment scam. "I lost most of the money," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The man disappeared, along with the savings of 8 other families from our congregation." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I genuinely was. "That must be very stressful." "I'm living in a small apartment now," she continued. "The rent is manageable, but I don't have much left over. And I've been having some chest pains. They turned out to be stress-related, nothing serious. But it made me think about being alone." I remained silent, letting her fill the space. "I was wondering if we could meet," she said finally, "to talk things through, maybe work out our differences." "What kind of working out did you have in mind?" I asked. "Well, I thought perhaps you could visit for Sunday dinner, like we used to. We could put this unpleasantness behind us and move forward as a family." There it was. The expectation that I would simply return to the old dynamic, pretending nothing had happened, grateful to be welcomed back into the fold. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no apology, no recognition that our relationship needed fundamental changes. "I'm willing to meet and talk," I said carefully. "But not for Sunday dinner and not at your apartment. We can meet in a public place, just the two of us, to have an honest conversation about what happened and what needs to change." "Change?" She sounded genuinely confused. "What needs to change? We're family, Layla. Family forgives and moves forward." "Family doesn't throw each other out without warning," I replied. "Family doesn't pack someone's belongings in boxes while they're traveling. Family doesn't treat each other as problems to be solved." A long silence stretched between us. "I was trying to help you become independent," she said finally, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "By traumatizing me? By humiliating me in front of the neighbors? By making me homeless with no notice or discussion?" "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest," I interrupted. "And if you want any relationship with me going forward, you need to be honest too. About what you did, why you did it, and what you're willing to do differently." Another silence. "I think you're being very unfair," she said, her tone shifting to the familiar manipulation I remembered so well. "After everything I sacrificed to raise you children alone, this is how you treat me in my time of need." The old guilt trip that might have worked 6 months ago felt hollow now. I'd learned to recognize emotional manipulation for what it was. "I'm treating you exactly how I would treat any person who hurt me the way you did," I said calmly, "with caution and clear boundaries." "Your siblings are very disappointed in your attitude," she said, pulling out another familiar weapon. "Marcus and Sarah haven't spoken to me since I left," I pointed out. "How would they know anything about my attitude? And David seems to understand perfectly well why I'm being careful about rebuilding trust." I could hear her frustration growing. This conversation wasn't going according to her script. "I don't understand why you can't just come home and be part of this family again," she said. "Because that version of family was toxic for me," I replied. "I won't go back to walking on eggshells, being compared to my siblings, or having my choices constantly criticized. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I won't sacrifice it to make other people comfortable." "So you won't help your own mother?" she asked, playing her final card. "I didn't say that," I said. "I said I won't pretend nothing happened and return to an unhealthy dynamic. If you're genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms, I'm willing to explore that. But it means acknowledging the harm that was done and working together to create something better." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the following Saturday, neutral territory, where either of us could leave if the conversation became unproductive. I spent the week preparing with Dr. Martinez, role-playing potential scenarios and reinforcing my boundaries. The night before our meeting, Ethan came over with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. We sat on my small balcony, sharing pad Thai and talking about the upcoming conversation. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted, but also clear about what I need from this interaction. 6 months ago, I would have been desperate for her approval. Now I'm just hoping for honest communication. "Whatever happens, you've got people in your corner," he said, reaching across the small table to squeeze my hand. Looking around my apartment, at the plants I'd learned to keep alive, the furniture I'd chosen, the photos of friends I'd made, the life I'd built entirely on my own terms, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete confidence in my own worth, regardless of what anyone else thought. Tomorrow's conversation with my mother would be challenging, but it wouldn't define me. I was no longer the desperate daughter seeking approval. I was a whole person, capable of offering relationship on my terms or walking away if necessary. The woman who would meet her mother for coffee tomorrow was fundamentally different from the one who'd found her belongings packed in boxes 6 months earlier. And that transformation, painful as it had been, was something no one could take away from me. Saturday morning arrived with Denver's typical autumn crispness, the kind of clear, bright day that makes everything seem more hopeful than it probably should. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing clothes that made me feel confident and professional, a navy blazer over dark jeans, boots that gave me a little extra height, and the silver necklace Ethan had given me for my birthday. Armor for battle, disguised as casual weekend wear. The coffee shop I'd chosen was in neutral territory, equidistant from both our neighborhoods. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table where I could see the entrance and have my back to the wall. A positioning strategy Dr. Martinez had suggested for maintaining psychological comfort during difficult conversations. My mother appeared exactly on time, which didn't surprise me. Patricia Brooke had always prided herself on punctuality, considering tardiness a character flaw. But the woman who walked through the cafe door looked diminished somehow, older and more fragile than the commanding figure who'd stood in our driveway 6 months earlier. She'd lost weight, which made her cheekbones more prominent and her eyes seem larger. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, looked slightly unkempt. She wore a simple sweater and slacks instead of the put-together outfits I remembered, and she carried herself with less certainty than the mother who'd once controlled every aspect of our family's life. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down across from me, her voice softer than I'd expected. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral and calm. We sat in uncomfortable silence while she ordered coffee from the server. I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman who'd raised me, the mother who'd existed before Dad died, and hardened her heart against vulnerability. "You look well," she said finally. "Healthy, happy even." "I am happy," I replied simply. "I'm glad," she said, and I thought I detected genuine relief in her voice. "I wasn't sure, after everything that happened." "You mean after you threw me out?" I asked gently but directly. She flinched. "I prefer to think of it as encouraging your independence." "Mom," I said, leaning forward slightly, "if we're going to have any kind of productive conversation, we need to be honest about what actually happened. You packed my belongings while I was away on a business trip. You gathered my siblings as witnesses. You ambushed me with eviction the moment I came home from what should have been a career triumph. That wasn't encouraging independence. That was punishment disguised as tough love. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. I thought it would motivate you to take charge of your life. I was taking charge of my life, I said. I had a job. I was advancing in my career. I was contributing to the household financially and practically. What I wasn't doing was living according to your specific timeline and expectations. Your siblings were given completely different treatment, I interrupted. Marcus lived at home until he was 24, with your full support. Sarah got help with her condo down payment. David's student loans mysteriously disappeared. I was the only one expected to figure it out entirely alone, and the only one whose choices were constantly criticized. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. Maybe I did handle things differently with you. Why? The question hung in the air between us. I genuinely wanted to understand, not to attack, but to comprehend how the mother who'd once made me elaborate birthday cakes had become someone capable of such cruelty. You were so much like your father, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Independent, creative, willing to take risks. After he died, those qualities scared me. I wanted to protect you from making choices that might leave you vulnerable. So you tried to control me instead? I tried to guide you toward security, she said defensively. Your siblings followed conventional paths, stable careers, traditional relationships, predictable lives. They seemed safer. Safer for whom? I asked. For me or for you? She looked up sharply. What do you mean? I think my independence reminded you of Dad, and losing him was so traumatic that you couldn't bear the thought of any of us making choices you couldn't predict or control. My siblings gave you the illusion of control by following your script. I didn't, and that terrified you. Tears welled in her eyes. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was trying to protect myself as much as you. It was the first genuine insight she'd shown into her own motivations, and I felt a small shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. I need you to know something, I continued. What you did didn't make me safer or more responsible. It traumatized me. For months, I had nightmares about being homeless. I struggled to trust anyone, including people who genuinely cared about me. I had to rebuild my entire sense of self-worth from scratch. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, I said. But intent doesn't erase impact. The road to my trauma was paved with your good intentions. She was crying openly now, something I'd rarely seen since Dad's funeral. I don't know how to fix this, Layla. I don't know how to be the mother you need me to be. I don't need you to be a different person, I said gently. But if we're going to have any relationship going forward, I need you to respect that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. I need you to stop comparing me to my siblings and trying to manage my life. And I need you to acknowledge that what happened 6 months ago was wrong. It was wrong, she whispered. I was so angry and scared, and I took it out on you in the worst possible way. The admission felt like a dam breaking. This was what I'd needed. Not just an apology, but genuine recognition of the harm that had been done. Where does this leave us? She asked. I'd thought about this question extensively during therapy sessions and long conversations with Ethan and Maya. I'm willing to rebuild our relationship, but it has to be different. No more Sunday dinners where I'm criticized and compared. No more unsolicited advice about my career or personal life. No more expectations that I'll be available to manage your emotions or fix your problems. What about my financial situation? She asked hesitantly. I'm not moving back home, if that's what you're asking. And I'm not giving you money to solve problems that resulted from choices you made without consulting anyone else. Her face fell. So you won't help me at all? I didn't say that. I'm willing to help within appropriate boundaries. I can research resources for senior financial assistance, help you understand your options, maybe contribute a small amount toward specific needs. But I won't sacrifice the stability I've built to rescue you from consequences of your own actions. That seems cold. It seems healthy, I corrected. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not responsible for managing anyone else's emotions or financial decisions. That's not cold. That's necessary. We talked for another hour, working through the practical details of what a relationship between us might look like. It would involve boundaries I'd never been allowed to set before. honest communication instead of manipulation and guilt, and mutual respect for each other's autonomy. "Your siblings think you're being stubborn," she said as we prepared to leave. "My siblings created this situation along with you," I replied. "Their opinions about my boundaries aren't particularly relevant. Marcus and Sarah want to reconcile too. Then they can reach out directly, acknowledge their role in what happened, and show me they're capable of treating me with respect. I'm not interested in group forgiveness sessions where everyone pretends nothing happened." As we stood to leave, my mother looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You really have changed, haven't you?" "I've become who I was always meant to be," I said. "The person I might have been all along if I hadn't spent so much energy trying to earn approval that was always conditional." "I am proud of you," she said quietly. "I may not have shown it properly, but I am proud of what you've accomplished." The words I'd spent years desperately wanting to hear felt different now than I'd imagined. They mattered, but they didn't define my sense of worth anymore. "Thank you," I said. "That means something to me. But Mom, I need you to understand that your pride in me can't depend on me making choices you approve of. I'm going to continue living my life according to my own values, and that has to be okay with you." She nodded slowly. "I'll try to learn how to do that." It wasn't a perfect resolution. There would be more difficult conversations, setbacks, and moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But it was a beginning, the first honest interaction we'd had in years. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because my mother had given me what I wanted, but because I'd been able to give her what she needed, while maintaining the boundaries that protected my well-being. That evening, I called David to update him on the conversation. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Hopeful but realistic," I said. She acknowledged that what happened was wrong, which is more than I expected. But changing decades of family patterns isn't going to happen overnight. And if she backslides? If she falls back into old behavior? Then I'll maintain my boundaries anyway, I said with confidence I wouldn't have possessed 6 months earlier. I've learned that I can love someone while still protecting myself from their dysfunction. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and my laptop, working on a blog post about setting boundaries with family members, I reflected on how far I'd traveled from the broken woman who'd found her belongings in boxes. The journey from that devastating moment to this place of quiet strength hadn't been easy, but every difficult step had been worth it. I'd learned to value myself independently of anyone else's approval, to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect, and to create a life that reflected my authentic self rather than inherited expectations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, in my own space, living according to my own values, finally free to be completely myself. 1 year since I found my life packed in cardboard boxes on my mother's front porch. 1 year since my family's betrayal shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and belonging. 1 year since I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, with tears streaming down my face and no idea how I'd survive. As I sat in my office at Creative Solutions Marketing, now the Director of Digital Strategy, with my own corner space and a team of 8 talented professionals, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. The scared, desperate woman who'd slept on Maya's air mattress felt like a character from someone else's story. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Dinner at 7? I'm making that pasta dish you love, and I have news to share." I smiled, typing back a quick yes. Our relationship had deepened over the months into something I'd never experienced before. Partnership based on mutual respect rather than need, support without suffocation, love without conditions or expectations of transformation. The morning had brought exciting news of its own. My blog, Flying Solo, had been optioned by a publishing house interested in turning it into a book about young adult independence and family estrangement. The advance wasn't life-changing money, but it represented validation of something I'd created purely from my own experience and passion. "Layla?" Jennifer knocked on my office doorframe. "The Steinberg Group is here for the quarterly review." I grabbed my presentation materials and headed to the conference room, where I'd be showcasing the digital campaigns my team had developed over the past quarter. 3 major client acquisitions, a 60% increase in overall engagement across all accounts, and recognition from industry publications for innovative social media strategies. The success felt different now than professional achievements had in my previous life. It wasn't something I used to prove my worth to family members who would never be satisfied. It was simply evidence of what I could accomplish when I focused my energy on growth rather than gaining approval. After the successful client meeting, I checked my personal email to find a message from Marcus, the first direct communication I'd received from my oldest brother since leaving home. "Layla," it began. "I know this is long overdue, and I'm not sure you'll even read this, but I need to apologize for my role in what happened. David told me about your conversation with Mom, and it made me realize how wrong we were to handle things the way we did. I let my own ideas about what your life should look like blind me to who you actually are and what you'd already accomplished. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I see now how unfairly we treated you, and I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long moment. A year ago, receiving this apology would have felt like vindication, proof that I'd been right all along. Now, it felt like a small piece of healing for wounds that had already largely closed through my own efforts. I replied briefly, "Thank you for the apology, Marcus. I appreciate you taking the time to reflect on what happened. I'm doing well and have built a good life for myself. Maybe we can have coffee sometime and see if there's a way to build a healthier relationship going forward." Sarah remained silent, which didn't surprise me. Of all my siblings, she'd always been the most invested in maintaining the family hierarchy that had positioned her as the successful daughter, in contrast to my perceived failures. My obvious thriving probably challenged her worldview more than anyone else's. But David and I had slowly rebuilt a genuine sibling relationship over the past several months. We met for coffee every few weeks, texted regularly, and had even attended a Broncos game together, something we'd never done as adults in our old family dynamic. He'd also started therapy, working through his own patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. My relationship with my mother remained complex but surprisingly functional. We had lunch once a month, spoke briefly by phone every few weeks, and had developed a rhythm of interaction that respected both of our boundaries. She'd stopped offering unsolicited advice about my life choices and had learned to ask about my work and relationships with genuine interest rather than judgment. The financial assistance I provided was minimal but consistent, a small monthly contribution toward her rent, and occasional help with specific needs like car repairs or medical copays. She'd enrolled in financial counseling through a seniors resource center and had begun rebuilding her savings slowly and responsibly. More importantly, she'd begun acknowledging my accomplishments without comparing them to my siblings' achievements. When my promotion to director was announced in the local business journal, she'd called to congratulate me without adding any commentary about how I should use the opportunity or what my next step should be. "I'm proud of you," she'd said simply. "You've built something impressive entirely on your own." It was the kind of unconditional approval I'd spent years desperately seeking, and receiving it felt nice, but not essential. I'd learned to be proud of myself independently of anyone else's recognition. The therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had evolved from crisis intervention to maintenance and growth. We met monthly now, focusing on continued boundary development, relationship skills, and processing the ongoing healing from childhood trauma. "You've become someone who can offer love without sacrificing yourself," she observed during our most recent session. "That's remarkable growth from where you started." My social circle had expanded far beyond my college friends, to include colleagues, neighbors, fellow volunteers, and people I'd met through various interests and activities. The book club had introduced me to 3 women who'd become close friends. The hiking group I'd joined had led to weekend adventures throughout Colorado and a sense of physical confidence I'd never possessed. Most meaningfully, I'd begun mentoring young adults who were navigating their own family estrangement or independence challenges. The scholarship fund I'd established had grown through small donations from blog readers and had helped 12 young people with housing deposits, professional clothing, or educational expenses. "Your story gives people permission to prioritize their own well-being," Maya told me during one of our weekly coffee dates. "You've shown that you can love your family while still protecting yourself from their dysfunction." As evening approached, I packed up my office and headed home to the life I'd built entirely according to my own choices and values. My two-bedroom apartment in a tree-lined neighborhood reflected my personality in every detail. Bold artwork, plants that I'd successfully kept alive, furniture chosen for comfort rather than appearances, and photos of adventures and relationships that brought me genuine joy. Ethan was already in the kitchen when I arrived, wearing the apron I'd bought him that read, "World's Okayest Cook," an inside joke about his tendency to follow recipes with mathematical precision. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing me hello in the easy, comfortable way of partners who've learned to share their lives without losing themselves. "Productive and exciting," I said, telling him about the book deal and Marcus's unexpected apology. "And how do you feel about your brother reaching out?" "Grateful but not desperate," I said, realizing as I spoke how much that response revealed about my growth. A year ago, I would have been so relieved to have any family member acknowledge my worth. Now it's nice, but it doesn't change how I see myself. Over dinner, Ethan shared his news, an offer to join a prestigious design firm that would require relocating to Portland. We talked through the implications, the opportunities it would create, and what it might mean for our relationship. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to take it," he said. "It's an incredible opportunity, but I also want to see where we're heading together." The conversation that followed was exactly the kind I'd never been able to have in my previous family relationships. Honest, collaborative, focused on finding solutions that honored both of our goals and dreams, rather than requiring one of us to sacrifice for the other. "I think you should take it," I said finally. "And I think I should consider what opportunities might exist for me in Portland too." "Really? You'd consider relocating?" "For the right reasons, absolutely. Not because I'm dependent on you or afraid to be alone, but because I want to share adventures with someone I love." Later that evening, as we sat on my balcony planning potential futures and watching the Denver skyline light up in the distance, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The family who had discarded me had given me something invaluable, the necessity of discovering my own strength. Being forced to rebuild my life from nothing had taught me that I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined. Learning to live without their approval had freed me to become authentically myself. The scared, desperate woman who'd found her belongings in boxes had been transformed into someone confident in her own worth, capable of healthy relationships, and clear about her boundaries and values. That transformation, painful as the process had been, was something no one could take away from me. My phone buzzed with a notification from my blog. A comment from a reader in Seattle. "Your post about chosen family helped me through the hardest week of my life. Thank you for showing that it's possible to thrive after family rejection. Your courage gives the rest of us permission to prioritize our own well-being." Messages like these arrived regularly, connecting me to a community of people who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create distance from dysfunction, that sometimes the healthiest choice is to stop trying to earn love that should be freely given. As Ethan and I headed inside, making plans for the future while remaining grounded in the present we'd built together, I felt something I'd never experienced during my years of trying to fit into my biological family, complete peace with who I was and the life I'd chosen. The woman typing her final blog post of the evening was nothing like the woman who'd been ambushed on her mother's front porch 12 months earlier. She was stronger, clearer, more compassionate, and infinitely more free. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes being forced out of where you think you belong leads you to where you actually belong. Sometimes family isn't about blood relationships, but about the people who see your worth and choose to celebrate it rather than diminish it. I'd learned that love shouldn't require perfect compliance, that achievement shouldn't be a prerequisite for belonging, and that the most important approval is the one you give yourself. The boxes that had once contained everything I owned had been replaced by a life too rich and full to fit in any container. And the woman who had driven away in tears had become someone capable of driving toward whatever adventure came next, confident that she could handle anything because she'd already survived the worst and discovered it had made her stronger. That night, I fell asleep in my own bed, in my own home, surrounded by my own choices, finally understanding that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings grow from the most painful endings.